If you look at the National Deer Association's headline when they did this study, it's called Genetically Modified Deer. And they talk about how you can't release them in the wild. These aren't genetically modified. This is happening in the wild every day. SSs are breeding with SSs every day. This isn't something that they went in and they did some kind of stem cell research or they started trying to change genetics. This is natural.
Welcome to Wildlife Outdoors with your host, Russell and Jose. If you have a passion for conservation of the outdoors, or you're enjoying a calming hike in the mountains, an exhilarating kayak trip on the river, feeling a fish on the end of your line, cooking on an open flame in a primitive campsite, or stalking big game, just waiting for the perfect shot, you're in the right place. So put on your boots and polarized sunglasses and come along for the ride.
It just seems strange to me that, agencies are willing to manipulate population structure, through culling and stuff like that. And I just don't see why experimenting with genetic structure is considered off limits. Like I don't understand. I don't understand the mentality behind, okay, well, we're not going to try that. Or they're looking at it like, oh, that's strange. We're not going to do that. And I'm glad that Oklahoma is finally doing it. So finally we can have, some large scale research on it. But I just don't understand. Like, it's just very strange to me. And like you said earlier, it's like they're trying to push a narrative or feed a narrative in terms of data collection and stuff like that. And I don't understand why. And do you have any speculation on why they might be pushing a certain narrative?
I think
Sorry, Tim, before you answer, do we have any strategy that a state agency has used that has been successful? I know they say that there's some success in reducing prevalence in like one small place in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, do we have a model that has worked that we can replicate?
Yeah, and after they bragged on that in New York, they had it again. So no, and that's what's frustrating. You'll watch Jason Sumner's and he'll say, and I know it feels like I'm picking on him, but I cannot imagine being a landowner in Missouri and my neighbor lets somebody come in and shoot $100 after I've tried to manage the place for 20 years. I would lose my mind. So what Jason Sumner tries to say, if you look at Wisconsin, when they quit culling, prevalence went up. Prevalence has plateaued. It's if you look at, they've really got about 4 or 5 bad counties. You got Sauk, you got Richland, you got Greene, you've got Iowa County, and Iowa County was their talking point. And I'm going to answer your question, Russell, but I'm going to relate it to what Doc's saying. So Iowa County a few years ago had a population decline of about 5,000 deer. Wisconsin does an incredible job. Their DNR does an incredible job on populations, CWD. You can watch anything that happens in every single individual county that happens there. And I've looked at it. I went back as far as they'll go back. Well, if you look at Iowa County, they when they did their study that similar to the one in Newton County we talked about a while ago, how deer with CWD die more, they really wanted to talk about Iowa County how population went down. Well, the next year it jumped right back up. You didn't see a press release on that. Iowa County fell small, but then you go look at Barron County, Calumet County, Ashland County. You can go in alphabetical order for about 10 counties that don't have CWD in Wisconsin, and half of them the population fell. So you're going to find in one little thing that happened and then blame it on CWD. What about Ashland, Barron, all of the other counties? Mm-hmm. Why did you not look at the ones that didn't have CWD? You're not giving the true story. It's the same thing they do in Wyoming. They talk about population declines, and in the study that you guys can go look it up on Wildfile that they did. Agency-driven news media. It just is. I'm sorry, but you can go look it up. And they talk about these deer that were lucky to be alive the next year. They collared these deer in the worst 2 winters in the history of Wyoming, in the Casper region, and then blamed it on CWD because they died. So Russell, I think the biggest thing to answer your questions on the financials there is if you leave it alone, or if you release an SS deer, then the funding is going to go toward breeders to fix it. Okay. And mm-hmm. I'm eligible for funding. I've never applied for a grant. I think if I'm doing business, it should not be the taxpayers paying for what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. That's just the way I look at it. There's a lot of breeders in the state of Alabama that get grants to breed SS deer through the Department of Ag. But these agencies know unless like Mississippi State wants to go put up a breeder pens and start breeding SS deer, which they should have done 10 years ago. This is not new data. This has been known for 10 years now. This is not brand new data. Why were they not doing this ahead of the game? They could have already restocked Benton and Marshall County and made that place healthy again. But the agencies are, unless they go put up a bunch of breeder pens, but they know the deer breeders are going to be ahead of the game to be able to get that funding.
What is their specific pushback against that?
To me, is pride. We said this for so long. We're right. And you guys, regardless of who you work for, if you're in your personal business, what is the number one thing that we all deal with? Every huge company has an HR department. So if you went in and you said, okay, we killed all of these deer, why do you think these guys are getting money when they come in and depop their breeder pens? They're getting paid for them by the government. The reason they're getting paid for them is because you're going to sign a piece of paper that says you're not going to come back and sue me. And what these individuals making these decisions don't realize, sovereign immunity only applies to the state. It don't apply to the individual making that decision. So the reason they don't want to come and say, hey, we were wrong. We destroyed your area in Missouri, but we were wrong. We destroyed your area in Richland County, but we were wrong. So they're not going to come and say that. They need to swallow their pride. It's like James Crowell always said, somebody needs to tell the emperor he don't have any clothes on. That's an old saying of tell somebody the obvious,
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put on a conspiracy hat real quick. And to me, it seems like most of these studies, they're not done solely by the state agencies. They're third parties, universities, things like that. So funding makes sense for me. So that's something that I've never really thought about much. I don't know too much about that side of it, to be completely honest. But when I've heard people talk about funding in the past, they're talking in relation to the state agencies getting funds from the federal government. But I don't know how many of those they actually look at the funding that the universities and or whoever they're using third party to help with the studies are receiving. And so that's a whole nother aspect of it that we can dive into if you'd like. I know Doc knows a little bit more about that than I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Doc.
My thing is, like, just specifically looking at Arkansas Game and Fish, there seems to be a thread running through everybody's argument that these state agencies are doing this because they're making money. Well, I looked at the breakdown of Arkansas Game and Fish, and they've got, somewhere around, let me check my notes here, nearly 250 employees from Arkansas Game and Fish who are either completely or tangentially dealing with CWD testing, monitoring, in some aspect.
How many?
Around 250.
Okay.
And the state got less than $250,000 for this.
Mm-hmm.
A quick AI search yielded that they spent like $2.1 million and got $77,000 ish in federal funding.
Right.
Like I wasn't a math major for more than a year or two, but you can't tell me that somebody's spending $2 million and making 75,000 ish back, and that's a net profit for it.
Yeah. Have you seen the documents that are going around about what happens in Missouri? The funding they get from various places. So like if we ask them here in Alabama, they'll tell you we don't get federally funding, and you can look it up for every state. You can go to APHIS and look up what a university gets, what each state agency gets. You can probably go to that right now in Arkansas. They've got a lot more than that, Doc. I may be wrong, but yearly. But what they're not telling you is what they're robbing from the Robertson-Pittman Act. I mean, so you're telling me, and I want to be clear on something as I can be here. When I talk about agencies, I'm not talking about game wardens. I think a lot of people get to throwing game wardens under the bus on this deal. They're going and doing their jobs. If they're going out and
before we get too far here, what search term would I use to get a complete net of what their federal funding for CWD research would be?
I would say go to APHIS, Department of Ag. So 2025. Here's the 2025 spending plan. Arkansas Game and Fish got $200,000. What did you say a while ago? 70,000.
Yeah, that's what AI was giving me.
I would be careful with AI on that, Doc, and I'm going to tell you why. AI regurgitates articles instead of actual fact. 2025, Arkansas got 200,000, Arizona got 200,000, California got 200, Florida got 200, Indiana got 200, Louisiana got 200, Massachusetts got 82. How big is Massachusetts? I mean, Mississippi got 195, North Carolina got 200, North Dakota got 200, Nevada got 200, Oregon got 200, Utah, Virginia, Washington, Wisconsin got 200. They put in every year. West Virginia got 70, Wyoming got 160. And then you got the tribal communities, and then you got the universities. Colorado State, 245,000. Midwestern University, $500,000. Montana, 375. Wyoming, 424. Utah State.
What was the Arkansas number?
For 2025, Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, 200,000.
And they spent 2.1 million.
Yeah,
still does not sound like a net positive for the state.
So of that 2.1 million, how much did they get for the Robertson-Pittman Act?
To look, it would give me an overall breakdown, not CWD, but let's see, PR dollars, AGFC 2020.
How much did they get from National Deer Association?
So we got to look more at a broader picture, not just federal funding. It sounds like there's
absolutely. So
yeah,
you do. I was just like, we had the
So Doc, have you seen the stuff that's come out about Missouri? I mean, so I can look at Missouri right here, and there's nothing from Missouri. Like Missouri is not on here, and Jason Sumners will tell you we don't get federal funds. We wish you could. We've applied for them. That's his exact words. Go look at the documents. The guy that paid. So if you want to get this information from an agency, you've got to pay to get it under the Privacy Act or something. I don't know.
Or for you.
Right. So go look at those numbers. And they're welcome to hop on here. I don't want to say anything that's not true. And you can look at a line item. Like, what was it? I don't know, $200,000 or $300,000 extra went to salaried employees on CWD management when you're going and doing what the people that you represent and don't want done. And then they'll tell you with the state, the agency's responsible for the deer, and the state don't own the deer. The people of the state own the deer. So, in Arkansas, everybody that buys that hunting license and pays property taxes is who owns those deer, not the agency.
I've talked to Russ about getting Randy Schweller, I think is his name, is our game and fish guy that does the media stuff. And I thought that it would be great to have him on, like, not specifically for this, but just in general, to find out, like, where does our funding for our state come from and what do we spend it on? Just as a baseline, so that the hunters in our state and the fishermen in our state know where it's going, where it's coming from, some accountability. That's a different podcast to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I take your point. I just don't think that, I don't see profit margin being a viable excuse for what we're seeing.
Doc, I can assure you this, and if I'm wrong, someone from Arkansas is welcome to come on here and tell me I'm wrong. What was that? If you put that on a P&L and it says they got 200,000 here, what did AI say they spent?
2.1, if I recall correctly.
So that's what, 1.85, $1.9 million on the red. They're not doing it. They're not doing it with that. There's no business model in the world, and at the end of the day, they have to be accountable to the state, and there's just it's coming from somewhere, and they're getting reimbursed.
Since when did fiscal responsibility become a business model of any state agency?
True, that's true. I agree with that. And you know what? Even if they're getting refunded half of that from the Robertson-Pittman Act, which is what state of Alabama tells me, they tell us they get no federal funding, so they're saying they're using up the Robertson-Pittman Act. So, or Pittman-Robertson. But anyway, they're saying they're using up that act. None of the hunters that I talk to want this. I mean, you'll see some every now and then, and maybe you're going to have some. I shouldn't say that, but I'm just going by what I see. Okay,
the vast majority of people of hunters and landers are pushing back against this.
Pushing back against it. Here's another thing too. Did you see the survey that Missouri sent out the other day? It was worded like this. And you think about the non-hunters that get this survey in the state of Alabama. Do you want Missouri to control the spread of chronic wasting disease? Heck, if I got that survey, I'd say yes. I mean, I'd say yes, but you're not. It's growing. So you're wasting. You're robbing money. And the biggest thing to me is scaring away hunters will never get back. I don't care where you are in the realm. Russell, I know you love fly fishing, dude. I've got to do that a few times in the Ozarks. That's my brother's favorite way of fishing. I don't care what realm you are in the outdoors. Okay. And there are people, and this is the reason the NDA jumped on the high fence breeding deer bandwagon. They know it's divisive. So we're going to blame it on the deer breeders to get people on our side. That was the role that they took. And in doing so, pushed the whole CWD narrative and blaming it on them because they knew it was a divisive topic. It's just like a politician taking something that and running with it because they know it's divisive to help them.
Mm-hmm.
The National Deer Association, according to their who was the head of their board of directors, I don't know, before it went from Quality Deer Management over to NDA, just did a post the other day, said they've lost 96% of their members. So what is NDA doing? They're pushing the whole CWD narrative. Do you think anything of that has to do with what they're pushing? If hunters are, if you were in Wisconsin, my favorite quote when the head guy in Wisconsin was under fire over all this, he said, "We did the best we could with the data we had in 2002." You know what? He was right. Okay, if you're still doing those draconian measures, and in 2026, you're not looking at the data. You're not looking at it. You're compromising landowners, deer hunters. And you go down the roads. This is a CWD zone. Anyway,
to me, it almost seems like, and I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist. It seems like it's an attack on the way of life for a lot of Americans. You know, historically, Americans have loved deer hunting, and I'm not going to go as far. I'll make some comments. You know, I'll put on my Candace Owens or Alex Jones conspiracy theory hat that they're trying to control our food and the way we eat, and trying to make sure that, you know, we don't provide for ourselves. Like, it might go to that extreme. I doubt it, but I mean, there's definitely something going on in terms of them trying to have control, whether it be to control elections or control the food process. There's something, there has to be something more to it, because I don't understand how majority of the constituents of the government don't want something to happen, but yet it continues to happen. We're seeing that in public lands right now as well. We're just seeing a lot of time.
I agree with you on that. I watched some of you on that, no doubt. Yep.
So I don't know. It just, that's a whole other rabbit hole that we're not even going to go down. But I mean, people need to open their eyes and receive all the facts. And that's why I'm glad that, you know, you came on with us, because you do have a lot of information and you're passionate about it. And we want the information out there. And there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with a lot of things that you say. And, you know, if they want to go look into it, and maybe they'll open their eyes to some of the facts. But it just seems very strange. CWD management is built around containment and acceptance rather than long-term improvement, is what it seems like. And, you know, agencies seem to be stuck managing it as a permanent condition instead of asking how herds might adapt biologically over time and actually, you know, come to a resolution of it.
Yeah. And I'm going to say one more thing on the finances. You know, when Jason Summers was asked in the Doge meeting, and if the state legislation calls together a Doge meeting and they bring the head of the department in, they're getting a lot of complaints. I mean, if you're going to bring everybody in and have that meeting, and Jason, you know, he goes, "We're really not hearing anything." And the lady goes, "Oh, no, this is the number one thing we're hearing. That's why we're all here." And he goes, "You know, we didn't have no new funding for any new projects this year. You just left a blanket statement, you know, saying there's no new funding. If anything didn't change from 23 to 24 or 24 to 25, doesn't mean what people are saying is true." I mean, if he literally in a 6-year period, and don't hold me to this, I think it was 6 years, got a $96,000 raise. Hey, and the Biden administration passes this whole CWD funding thing. There needs to be some answers to that. I ain't got a problem with somebody that works hard, that's successful, being paid whatever is on that level. But a $93,000 jump is strange. And if that happened, all of this funding that came out was $70 million. $70 million available per year. If all of that funding came out, and these states are pushing it as hard as they can, and they can say, okay, we spent an additional, what would you say, Doc, while ago, $2 million on.
Yeah, it was 2.1 is the number I recall reading. Don't hold me to that. We're based off my TBI addled memory, but yeah, right. Something like that.
And what you have to remember on this APHIS stuff, they have to turn in a project to get these grants. These are grants. This is not, we went out and did this work, we won't reimburse for it. Okay, these are grants. In other words, you've got, like Tennessee had one where they were training German Shepherds to smell CWD. I mean, what are we going to do? Take dogs and run them around out in the wild and try to smell of a deer? I mean, you have to have some logic to some of this. So these are grants. Okay, federal funding is a grant based on a project. If Arkansas went out and spent $2 million and they make a line item for everything, the head director had to spend 10 more hours a week on CWD management, and this is what he made, he's going to get paid for that and to get reimbursed. I would do that all day long in my business. Okay, if I can get paid for 10 extra hours and just send it in and get reimbursed, then they need to tell us that's not happening. They need to tell us that that's not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a difference between reimbursement and use it or lose it money.
Yes, 100% difference. So, and if in the state of Alabama is telling me we are using funds, from what hunters are giving us, that's even a bigger problem.
This has been a lot of doom and gloom. It sounds like a lot of negative. Is there a path forward?
I think it's what Russell keeps hitting on. I think you have to look at genetics. Here's another one that drives me crazy, and I'm gonna try to end it on a positive with it. Everything you read from Kip Adams and all the guys that push the CWD doom and gloom narrative, 96 SS genotype steer live longer, so they shed in the environment. Okay, let's take 100 deer. Okay, if 10 of them are SS, and no, we'll have to go bigger than that because if 96% of them, let's take 100 of them, and 96% of them never get it, and 4% do, and maybe live a few years longer, but all the GGs are getting it. What's shedding in the environment more? And you're going to say, well, they live a few years longer, so they're shedding in the environment more. What you didn't tell everybody is almost all of them never got it. Even when exposed to it over and over and over again, they never got it. But these GGs over here are getting it every time they're exposed to them. They're shedding. But you're gonna quote it like this: the SSs live longer with it, so they shed more. So you're talking about 4% of the population of the SSs versus 70% of the population of the GGs, and you're worried about 3 or 4 of them maybe living a year or two longer.
Right.
I mean, it's
as a guy managing a farm, having bucks die at 3 years old versus a buck die at 5 years old. That's a huge difference to me as a landowner and a hunter.
Yes, no doubt.
That's the difference between a 110 and a 140.
100%. And even I get giggly about we talked about us having a preserve and a high fence here. We do 20 times more free range hunts here at Willow Oak than we do in our preserve. That's a quick hunt. It's over with in about 2 weeks. We have fun with it. We love our preserve hunts. I like watching them grow old, grow big. But when I see a 4 or 5 year old deer in the wild, nothing moves me like that. I don't even whether he's racks a 120 or a 160. When I see that big old block body, and I know he was a monarch, and he has seen what all he has seen in 5 years, that just moves me from a hunter. And to say, well, they live longer, but they're going to shed more prions if they do get it. But you're not going to talk about the 96% that don't ever get it. So that's how they spin it, and that's what's frustrating with me. We've actually got some articles coming out. The Minnesota Game and Fish lady, she said, over my dead body will we ever release a deer from captive facility into the wild? How open minded are you to say something like that? How dug in are you?
I generally don't have much time for people who speak in absolutes.
Yes, yes, I agree.
I apologize for the interruption, but that's my feel, like, okay, if this is the solution, or if this is a solution that we can implement now, a partial solution implemented now is better than a perfect solution implemented too late.
Right. Hey, so there is a guy in Minnesota that had been breeding SS deer for years, majority of his fawns that were born, so Minnesota comes in and tells him, you can't transport any of these deer. You can't do anything with them. You can't move them. And he literally had no choice but to kill them. I mean, he had no choice. He had nothing he could do with them, let them starve to death because they were getting overpopulated with his pen. These were the healthiest CWD resistant grown deer in the nation. And the guy, Minnesota, told him you can't move them. So he had to euthanize them. And you've got a lady running the DNR or as a part of the DNR says, over my dead body, will they ever be released? Okay. And look, I'll take the argument a step further. If Kip Adams says, well, we don't know if they're CWD because you can't do a live test, but all their studies are on live test. Imagine that. Go put them in a CWD zone. What's it hurting?
Right.
Go put them in a CWD. Go put them in Newton County. Go release them all in Newton County. What's it going to hurt? It's already a CWD zone. You're releasing the healthiest disease-resistant deer available. And none of these agencies are working together to try to say this is what we need to do. It's just mind-boggling.
You think it's willful ignorance?
I think it's we're right and you're wrong.
Ignorance is not the right word, but you get my tongue.
Yeah, if you read anything that they publish, they will say listen to trained biologists and look. I got a college degree. I've never seen a group that wants to say we're right, you're wrong more than wildlife biologists. And there's some great wildlife biologists. Don't get me wrong, but when it comes to CWD, because they got a degree, you know how.
Dr. Fauci. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So you know what advancements they've made in the medical community on CJD? None. Alzheimer's? None. The brain cells don't replicate. Neurological cells do not replicate. Okay. And so you're telling me we're waiting on a cure for CWD? You know, if you get CJD in the human realm, you get your things in order. It's a heartbreaking deal. You know, it's pancreatic cancer. There's just certain things that the medical community can't solve, and we're going to take these deer in the wild and we're going to solve it. Yeah. But yet you have information here now that genetics does, and you're going to ignore it because you're too proud and you're too prideful because what you take Kip Adams, who has ridiculed the farmed community, farm service for his entire career, to now have to go back and say, yeah, the farm community is the answer. It's a pride thing. I can't think of anything else. You know what? If you want to say in Oklahoma, okay, you can only release them in a CWD zone. They don't even want that.
Wow. So to be devil's advocate here, is there a potential that, like, given what we know and understand about prions, and like how real is the risk that the potential benefits of resistance could drive prion like evolution in unpredictable ways, that the prions may, evolve and create different strains or anything like that? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that goes back to what Doc said earlier. Nothing's an absolute. But here's the deal. If you look at the National Deer Association's headline when they did this study, it's called Genetically Modified Deer. And they talk about how you can't release them in the wild. These aren't genetically modified. This is happening in the wild every day. SSs are breeding with SSs every day. This isn't something that they went in and they did some kind of stem cell research, or they started trying to change genetics. This is
like natural. Breeding. Yeah.
Yeah, they're breeding. This is happening in the wild right now in Newton County, Arkansas. Hopefully that one SS deer they found will find him a female and breed. This is already happening in the wild.
It's no different than natural selection.
It's no different than natural selection.
It's actually natural selection on fast forward.
Yes. So if CWD is just like EHD produces different strains, we have a problem with EHD when we get a hurricane come in, because when a hurricane pushes all different variations of midge flies into our area that has not been there, the deer are not as resistant to it. It's kind of like you go to Mexico and drink the water. The local residents don't have an issue. We're on the toilet for 2 days. It's all about resistance that happens. But these deer are not genetically modified. There's nothing about them that is this different than what's happening in the wild. You're just if science tells me that SS deer don't get CWD, but in a very, very minute scenario, even when exposed to it over and over and over again, and that's the whole. It's 100% fatal, and that's why I did that post the other day. Okay, what is this deer? If he's exposed to it and he don't get it, that's what do you characterize him? Because he was exposed to it just like the deer that was and died from it, if it did. So it's they don't talk about it. Agencies don't talk about it. They don't want to push it. They belittle it. That's the part that's where they lost me. I mean, it just I don't know. Even in Oklahoma, legislation passed that. The agency wasn't for it.
Yeah.
And it's like we had a deal here in Alabama last year, HB 509, that passed the House like 58-6, where when we had a CWD case in Colbert County, they did an emergency deal and went in and killed 2 deer that were in a 10-mile stretch of that, even though the person had already turned in 6 samples. Okay, if CWD was contagious, how was it not found in those 6 samples? So legislation went in and overrided the agency. It was like 58-6 in the Alabama State House. That common sense is prevailing. They look at it different. They have such a mindset of this is the way it is, and we've got to control it. It just doesn't even make sense. It doesn't.
No.
Do you think there's an aspect of, like, I know Missouri, the hunting community spoke and kind of overrode their game and fish. Alabama sounds, or Mississippi sounds like they're doing the same thing. You feel like the momentum's building that way?
Yeah, I think when you look at outdoorsmen, I really mean this. You're talking about salt of the earth people. You're really talking about if you're looking at a community, they're honest people. They come from a background where their parents probably got them into hunting and fishing. If you look at it as a whole, if you were to say what community is salt of the earth in America, outdoorsmen would be at the top of the list. It just would. I think we'll all agree on that. And they're pretty laid back. They're not outspoken until they need to be. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what has happened. I've talked to some of these people that are in Missouri that work hard on their 200 acres, and a landowner that had 10 acres beside them wasn't as fond of hunting. Maybe the deer were eating her flowers or something. They let them come in and shoot all they wanted. And that's not right. That's not the way the model is supposed to be. And I think to answer that, Doc, I really think there is common sense where people are seeing none of this worked, and you're doing nothing but running away hunters. It's like Dr. Kroll says, you're running away hunters will never get back. And once they go on and get past their 20s and they start getting into some other kind of hobby, regardless if they were exposed to hunting, you tell them that venison may be dangerous to eat, mind-boggling.
See, that's another thing that's a whole other aspect of it is the fear mongering on ingesting a deer that is CWD positive. There has not been one case of it going from cervids to humans. Granted, I know there's always going to be, a patient zero, and if it happens, it happens. But the amount of fear that is put into people about ingesting and consuming CWD positive deer boggles my mind. I don't understand it. If there's not been one case, why are people so scared?
Zombie deer headlines.
Yeah,
right.
Could you Google?
Yeah. I think I saw there was 30 million tons of venison consumed last year. Or maybe wrong on that, but I think that's what it was. And mutton was even more than that. And if you look at globally, we don't eat a lot of sheep and goats here. We eat some, but in Europe and everywhere else, it is huge, as big as beef in a lot of places. And no one has ever got it. In an 8 billion global population, nobody has ever. And people talk about BSE. BSE is on a whole different spectrum than scrapie and goats. They don't want to talk about that. It's a whole different spectrum. And
that only came from feeding bovines brains from other bovines.
100%, Doc. They don't want to mention that. They were feeding them, cow brains. And you go look at kudu that happened with the tribes, that cannibalism, and all the other prion diseases. So, hog brains was a delicacy at one time. You don't hear that no more. A little bit of common sense starts prevailing. But the thing about consumption of venison, it's not the venison, it's the prion. There's absolutely nothing in it that is contaminated as far as CWD goes, except for the prion, and the prion in it is all of those plants. that's being shipped globally around the country, the topsoil, the corn, the wheat, the milo, the Bermuda, everything that's being shipped all over this country. And wheat, that study about wheat, it was the easiest one to get to grow in. What are we all planting our green fields in?
Will you expand on that? I was talking to Russ about this earlier before we, while we were testing the microphones and stuff. Your post today, will you expand on that about, like, okay, if the presumption is that these prions are in plant matter,
yeah,
and we're expanding it all over the country, just give us a 3-minute rant on that, because I found that fascinating.
Yeah, so test results are what everything goes by on CWD. 1,000,000% they tell us that it comes from the prions. 1,000,000%. In coyotes, raccoons, everything sheds prions, but it's the CWD prion that is released. So what they did in these studies, and they're not, I can promise you, why are they not going out and checking cornfields? Why are they not going out and checking them? First of all, they don't want to demolish a farmer's crop to just go run it through a CWD lab. But what every one of these studies did, they took CWD from urine, blood samples, anything, and they put it in a controlled environment in the soil. Same thing. You can call it a controlled environment. Same thing's going to happen in the wild. CWD went in all the plants. Wheat, alfalfa, grasses, all of it. CWD was exposed in one study early on, like in the early part of the decade, said, well, it's only going in the roots. And then a study comes out 2 years later and debunked it, said, no, it's in the leaves, it's in the seed, it's in all of it. You can find them. But why are these agencies not talking about that? They'll tell you that the deer get it from a shed in the environment. Well, yeah, maybe in Benton County, Mississippi, if a deer, poops over here on a green field and another deer eats grass that's growing right there, it's going to get it. What about all of those millions of tons of crops? It's all in growing in the Midwest, which is where CWD is. Mm-hmm. All of those millions of tons of corn, soybeans, everything that's shipped everywhere. They don't talk about regulations on that, and there never will be. You can't shut that down when nobody's ever got CWD. Could you imagine them going to the row crop industry and say, we're not going to let you ship that corn out of your county? And then them saying, well, there's never been a case of it harming a human. That conversation would end in about 2 seconds. Yeah.
But yeah, they talk about it more in deer and saying, oh, well, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
And yeah. It doesn't make sense to me. So I'm just hoping that we're kind of getting to a turning point where common sense is taking over. I'm excited to see what the successes are going to be in Oklahoma, and hopefully have some concrete data to prove that it's going to be more beneficial than not. So,
yeah, somebody made a good point that Boone and Crockett is saying, they're all saying, hey, these deer aren't going to live in the wild. Yeah, they will. Unless somebody shoots them, you got odds of that happening just like every other deer. But if you're releasing them in there, what's going to happen? The Boone and Crockett, if they are saying we're not going to recognize them, well, you're saying over here they're not going to live. Then you're saying over here, if they do, we're not going to recognize them. So which is it?
And how are they going to figure that out?
I have no idea. I
know, like with the like blacktail and mule deer, they have a geographic boundary.
Yeah,
I think it's I-5 in like Washington, Oregon. They don't do genetic testing to see, did you have a blacktail or did you have a mule deer? It's geographic location that they use to decide it.
Right.
But now they want to come in and say that the deer you shot in Oklahoma was
come
because they hit Boone and Crockett minimum. Right. Are they like, here's our antler spread, or here's our antler score sheet and a genetic test?
Yeah, but are we really, great point, but are we really mad that a 170 gets killed that is enhancing CWD resistance in the land? I don't know that you'll find 100. I mean, if you take Texas Parks and Wildlife, they have an entire hatchery all throughout their state, hatcheries growing bigger largemouth bass. They even knew that they had largemouth bass virus, and they're still putting them in Lake Fork and Sam Rayburn and Toledo Bend.
Yeah, the Texas Longer Program. Arkansas, just too much fanfare.
Yes,
has opened theirs.
Yes, so all of those state records that are getting caught, which is phenomenal. I mean, you think I'm going to be mad because I caught a 14-pounder that was Florida strain and brought in? No.
Yeah, so a Florida strain bass is fine. An Oklahoma strain whitetail excluded. Like,
yeah, exactly. I mean,
both taught under fair chase rules.
Yeah. I mean, and okay. So at what point is a pond or a lake big enough? If it's a 5-acre farm pond that you got a 12-pound bass out of, it don't count because it's fair chase. You know, when people
if I stocked my own farm pond with Florida bass, and it's not counted, but the state started put them in a reservoir, it does count.
Exactly. And I don't know about Arkansas or Oklahoma or any of that, but in Alabama, all of our deer were stocked. All of them in the 50s and 60s were brought in from Michigan, Texas, different places. We were all
Arkansas
stocked.
100%. One of the best. I had it saved on my laptop died and I lost it. But I used to have it came from the old QDMA, and it was historical, and you could track where they had brought in on a state map of Arkansas, where they'd restocked in like the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And the crazy part was that those deer had kept, like, they'd bring in deer from Minnesota and then from West Texas and then South Texas and North Texas and, all over the country. They brought this whitetail stock in. But the crazy part was they were tracking fawn birth dates, date they were born, and conception dates. And it was all over the map because those deer they brought in had, despite what longitude and latitude they'd brought them in for, they had kept their same rut dates.
Wow.
And their same dates the females went into heat. So you would have like a map, and it'd be like in parts of Newton County and Madison County, Arkansas, it would be November 15th was the height of the rut, and some places would be November 1st, and some places would be December 15th. And you map it on a map with these heat clusters, and it all corresponded to where they brought these deer in from 40, 50, 60 years before.
That's crazy.
It was fast. I wish I could, if I could ever find it again.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you, Russ, so we can post it. But like their fidelity to their biological rut and estrus dates was crazy, like 60 years later, however many generations that is of deer.
Yeah.
But you could literally see it, and people like people were talking on Facebook, like, well, the rut's already over in my area, and somebody one township over was like, it hadn't even started here. And they're both calling each other liars. And then you see this map of, what it is, well, at White Rock, they brought in deer from Tennessee and Minnesota.
Yeah.
The deer had fidelity to where they were geographically from as far as photo period.
Yeah.
It was a whole thing. It was fantastic.
Yeah. And I tell you what else that shows, Doc. It shows just what we talked about earlier. I mean, that had to be 30, 40, 50 years ago that Arkansas brought them in, probably 60.
It started in from the, I think, late post World War II all the way up until whenever they stopped.
You look at how those genetics stayed in the rut dictating that. Same thing in Alabama. You get in different parts and the rut's different. That goes to show you, to me, that CWD is a genetic problem. If you've got these little windows, so whatever was going on in Newton County, you had a horrible GEB value, and it kept breeding. It kept breeding, and it needs to be fixed. And that's so if you're only looking at 30 miles away and the rut's different, that goes to show you those deer stayed in those clusters, they stayed in their environment, and they kept breeding each other.
Yeah, and bringing one in from Texas to reinvigorate the herd was fine, but now bringing one in that's CWD resistant is now verboten.
Yeah,
amazing.
Which is crazy to me because, it's not like we're talking about, interchanging species or subspecies here. We're talking about genomic differences within the same species that show a higher resistance. Yeah, and it also helps with
Oklahoma to Arkansas. They adjoin.
Yeah. And it also helps with genetic diversity and smaller population sizes where you can run into a genetic bottleneck. Bringing in a different deer, whether it be GS or SS or whatever the case may be, can also help with genetic diversity as well. So.
Yeah. And you look at the largemouth bass that we talked about. What is the top 20 world records in California are all Florida strains. California would have never had that. Nobody's complaining about that. I mean, it's exciting. It helped their tourism. People go to those Southern California lakes to fish. Same thing in East Texas. Those giant 13, 14, the 16, 17 pounders caught at Lake Fork are Florida strain largemouth. It's just all crazy to me. So hypocritical.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, well, we're kind of coming up on time to end this episode out, but I greatly appreciate your time, and
Yes.
I wish we had more time to dive deeper into it. But we'd also love to have you on to talk fishing content on another episode.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, well, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on here with us. And those of y'all watching to the end, we appreciate y'all watching, and we'll catch y'all next time.
This has been Wildlife Outdoors. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook at Wildlife Outdoors and on Instagram at wild.life.outdoors. Let's go live life on the wild side.